The gala was frozen. Lucas could hear the faint hum of the air conditioning, the distant clink of a glass from the bar, the rustle of expensive silk as someone shifted their weight. But the only sound that truly registered was the ragged rhythm of his own breathing and the soft, wet sniffle coming from his daughter. Julian's hand was still hovering near Maya's wrist, his fingers suspended above the plastic beads like he was afraid to touch them. His pale blue eyes were fixed on the charm, and for a moment, just a moment, the cold, impervious mask of the billionaire cracked, revealing something raw underneath. Something that looked almost like grief. "Daddy," Maya's voice was small, trembling. She looked from Lucas to Julian, her small body pressed against the marble pillar. "Are we in trouble?" Lucas wanted to tell her everything was fine. He wanted to scoop her up and run, to disappear back into the anonymity of his janitor's uniform and forget this night ever happened. But his legs felt like concrete, and his throat was too tight to form words. Julian straightened. He took a step back, his hands dropping to his sides. The mask was back, smooth and impenetrable, but his eyes, those icy eyes, kept flicking to the bracelet, to the tiny, worn charm, to the faded initials. "Mr. Croft," Julian said, his voice quieter now, stripped of its earlier contempt. "I need you to come with me. Both of you." Lucas instinctively moved in front of Maya, shielding her with his body. "Why?" Julian's jaw tightened. "Because I want to talk to you. Privately. Away from all of this." He gestured vaguely at the crowd, who were now openly staring. Some whispered behind their hands. A woman in a diamond necklace smirked into her champagne flute. "Whatever you have to say, you can say it here," Lucas said, his voice steadier than he felt. He wasn't going to let this man who had just had him physically removed, drag him into some back room like a criminal. Julian's eyes narrowed. For a moment, Lucas thought he was going to call security again. Then Julian did something unexpected. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a slim leather wallet. He flipped it open, revealing a worn photograph tucked behind his credit cards. Lucas leaned forward, squinting. The photo was old, faded at the edges. It showed a woman in her late 30s, her hair pulled back in a practical bun, her face lined with the weariness of hard work. She was smiling. In her hand, she held a child's hand, a little boy, maybe 5 or 6, with messy hair and a gap-toothed grin. Around the boy's wrist, clear even in the faded image, was the exact same bracelet, the same blue plastic beads, the same silver fish charm. Lucas felt the air leave his lungs. "That's my mother," Julian said, his voice flat. "Elena Harrington. Before she married my father. Before she became Elena Harrington." He paused. "She used to work as a cleaner. For a while, she was a single mother. She had no money, no support, just a little boy who was always getting into trouble." His gaze flicked to Maya. "She used to tell me that bracelet was her lucky charm. She made it herself," she said, "with her own hands. She gave it to me when I was 6 years old. I wore it until the day she died." Lucas's mouth went dry. He looked down at Maya's wrist, at the bracelet he'd found in his mother's jewelry box after she passed. He'd never thought much about it, just a childhood relic, a piece of sentimental junk. He'd given it to Maya when she was born, a small piece of her grandmother to carry with her. "I found it in my mother's things," Lucas said slowly. "After she died. She never told me where she got it. She just said it was special." Julian nodded, a single, sharp movement. His expression was unreadable. "My mother had a sister. A younger sister. They were separated when Elena was a teenager. My mother never stopped looking for her, but she never found her. She died believing her sister was dead, too." Lucas felt the floor drop out from under him. "You're not saying?" "I'm saying my mother's maiden name was Elena Croft. Her younger sister's name was Margaret. Margaret Croft." Julian's eyes locked onto Lucas's. "You said your mother was a cleaner. She died 20 years ago in a car accident. She made this bracelet." Lucas's brain short-circuited. He tried to remember his mother's stories, the fragments of a childhood she rarely talked about. She'd always been private about her past, deflecting questions with a sad smile and a change of subject. He'd assumed it was just grief. His father had died young, and she'd raised him alone, working double shifts to keep food on the table. "Margaret was my mother's name," Lucas whispered. "Margaret Croft." Julian turned away, walking a few steps and stopping by the window that overlooked the city. For a long moment, he just stood there, his back to them, his silhouette framed against the glittering skyline. The gala continued around them. People trying to pretend nothing had happened. Conversations resuming with forced cheerfulness. But Lucas felt like they were in their own bubble, disconnected from the world. My mother's sister, Julian said finally, without turning around. I have an uncle. You're my cousin. The word hung in the air. Cousin. Lucas almost laughed. He was a janitor who lived in a cramped apartment with a 6-year-old and a mountain of debt, and the man who'd just had him thrown out of a party was telling him they shared blood. I don't understand, Lucas said, his voice cracking. If you knew about her, why didn't you find her? Why didn't you? Because I was 10 years old when she died, Julian said, turning back to face him. There was something raw in his voice now, a crack in the armor. My mother never told me about her sister until she was on her deathbed. She made me promise to find Margaret, to take care of her. I spent years looking. I hired private investigators. I searched every database I could access, and I found nothing. Because Margaret Croft never existed in any system. She married, she changed her name, and she vanished. Lucas stared at him. She married my father. She took his name, Williams. Julian's expression flickered with something, shock, anger, resignation. Williams. That's why I couldn't find her. She changed her name to Williams. He let out a bitter laugh. 20 years. 20 years of searching, and my cousin was working in my building the entire time, cleaning my office. The irony was so sharp it almost cut. Lucas remembered the long nights, the sore muscles, the humiliation of emptying trash cans in a building full of people who never looked at him twice. And all the while, a man who could have changed his life was just a few floors away. I didn't know, Lucas said quietly. I never knew who you were. My mother never told me about your mother. She didn't talk about her family at all. Julian nodded slowly. She was trying to protect you from the mess my family was in. My father, he stopped, his jaw clenching. My father was not a good man. If he'd known Margaret existed, he would have used her, controlled her, destroyed her. Lucas felt a cold chill run down his spine. He looked at Julian, at the controlled fury in his eyes, and realized there was more to this story than he understood. Julian Harrington wasn't just a cold-hearted CEO. He was a man carrying the weight of a complicated, painful past. Mr. Harrington, Lucas started, but Julian cut him off. Julian, he said. Call me Julian. We're family. The word felt foreign, wrong. Lucas had spent so long alone, raising Maya by himself, scraping by on minimum wage. He didn't have a family. He'd accepted that a long time ago. And now this man, this powerful, intimidating man, was telling him they were cousins. I don't want your money, Lucas said suddenly, the words tumbling out. I don't want anything from you. I just came here to ask for help for Maya. That's all. I wasn't trying to trick you, or... I know. Julian's voice was softer now. I know you weren't trying to trick me. You didn't even know who I was. You thought I was just some rich guy who could write a check. He paused. But now that I know who you are, who she is, I'm not going to walk away. Maya tugged at Lucas's sleeve, her small face pale and confused. Daddy, are we going home? Lucas crouched down beside her, his knees protesting. Soon, sweetheart. I just need to talk to this man for a few more minutes. Are you my uncle? Maya asked, looking up at Julian with wide, curious eyes. Julian stared at her. The child was so small, so fragile. She reminded him of someone. A memory flickered. His mother, young and tired, tucking him into bed with a lullaby. She'd been so strong, so fierce in her love for him. He'd never understood how she could smile when she was so exhausted, so broken. Yes, Julian said, the word coming out rough. I suppose I am. Maya's face broke into a shy smile. I never had an uncle before. My daddy doesn't have any brothers or sisters. He's always alone. The sentence landed like a blow. Lucas looked away, his throat tight. He'd tried so hard to hide his loneliness from Maya, but kids always knew. They always sensed the cracks in the facade. Julian was silent for a long moment. Then he crouched down, bringing himself to Maya's eye level. Your daddy isn't alone anymore, he said quietly. Neither are you. Do you understand what I'm saying? Maya shook her head, but she was still smiling. You talk funny. Julian almost smiled. Almost. The corners of his mouth twitched, and for a moment, he looked almost human. I talk like a grown-up, he said. And you talk like a very smart little girl. I'm 6, Maya announced, holding up her fingers. 6 is very old, Julian said solemnly. That's practically an adult. Maya giggled. It was a small, fragile sound, but it cut through the tension like a ray of light. Lucas watched the exchange, his heart pounding. He didn't know what to do, what to think. His entire life had just been turned upside down. He had a cousin, a rich, powerful cousin who might be able to help Maya. But something about the way Julian looked at the bracelet, the way his eyes flickered with old pain, made Lucas wary. "Julian," Lucas said, straightening. "If you want to help, that's fine. But I need to know why. Not because we're family. Why do you really want to help?" Julian stood, brushing off his suit. The mask was back, smooth and unreadable. But his eyes, there was something in them, something deep and raw. "Because I owe her," Julian said quietly. "I owe your mother. She was the only person who ever believed in my mother. The only one who never gave up on her." He paused. "And because I've spent 20 years trying to atone for my mother's death." Lucas blinked. "Your mother's death, you didn't kill her. Doesn't matter." Julian's voice was flat. "I could have done more. I could have been there. But I was too busy proving myself to my father. Too busy trying to be the son he wanted." He turned away, his profile sharp against the glittering skyline. "She was sick. For months. And I was too arrogant to see it." The words hung in the air. Lucas recognized that guilt, the endless, gnawing guilt of not being enough, of failing the people you loved most. "I understand," he said quietly. "More than you know." Julian turned back to face him, his expression unreadable. "I don't think you do," he said. "But you will. If you give me the chance to prove it." Lucas looked at Maya, who was now clutching her rabbit and yawning. She was exhausted. So was he. But something in Julian's face, something raw and vulnerable, made him pause. "What do you want?" Lucas asked. Julian's eyes met his. "I want to help Maya. I want to make sure she never has to worry about medication again. I want to make sure her asthma is treated, that she has everything she needs to grow up healthy and happy." He paused. "And I want to know more about your mother. About Margaret. I never got to meet her, but I want to know who she was." Lucas swallowed hard. "I can do that," he said. "I can tell you about her." Julian nodded. For the first time that night, something like warmth flickered in his eyes. "Good," he said. "Then let's start with the basics. What do you need?" "Lucas, and I mean right now. Tonight." Lucas hesitated. He was used to being independent, to solving his own problems. But the weight of the past few months, the sleepless nights, the constant worry, the fear that Maya might have an attack he couldn't stop, pressed down on him. "Her inhaler," Lucas finally said. "We need a refill. The prescription ran out, and the insurance isn't covering it. I have the money saved up, but the pharmacy closes in an hour." Julian pulled out his phone and made a call. "Get me a driver," he said into the receiver. "Now." Then, to Lucas, "We're going to the pharmacy. We'll get her medication tonight. And then we're going to talk." Lucas watched him, still caught between suspicion and hope. "Just like that?" he asked. Julian looked at him, his eyes hard and cold once more. But there was a new line around his mouth, a new tension in his jaw. "No," Julian said. "Not just like that. This is just the beginning, Lucas. There's a lot you don't know. About your mother. About my mother. About who we really are." He looked down at Maya, then back at Lucas. "But for now, the most important thing is to get her medication. Everything else can wait." Lucas nodded slowly, unable to find words. He looked at Maya, at her small hand wrapped around the rabbit's ear, and felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in a long time, that hope. But as Julian led them toward the door, bypassing the silent, staring crowd, Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the first step into a much darker, more complicated world. The driver was waiting outside, a black SUV with tinted windows. Julian held the door open for them, and Lucas helped Maya inside. As he climbed in after her, the cold leather seats and the smell of luxury clashing with his cheap suit, he looked back at Julian. "Why are you really doing this?" Lucas asked. Julian's eyes met his. The mask slipped, just for a moment, revealing something raw and unguarded. "Because I spent 20 years searching for a family I thought I'd lost," Julian said quietly. "And I'm not going to let you slip away again." The door closed, and the SUV pulled away from the curb. Lucas watched the Harrington Tower fade into the distance, the glittering lights blurring as the city sped past. That Maya leaned against him, her breathing uneven. She was getting sicker. He could hear it in the rasp of her breath, the slight wheeze that made his stomach drop. "Hold on, sweetheart," Lucas whispered, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "We're almost there." In the front seat, Julian sat in silence, his phone pressed to his ear. He was speaking in a low, urgent voice, arranging something, preparing something. Lucas didn't know what the future held. He didn't know if he could trust this man, this stranger who claimed to be family, but right now, all that mattered was Maya. And as the city lights flashed by, he sent up a silent prayer to whoever might be listening. Please. Please let her be okay. The SUV turned onto the pharmacy street. Lucas saw the neon sign glowing in the distance, and a sliver of relief cut through the fear. Then Julian's phone buzzed. Julian looked down at the screen, and his face went pale. "What is it?" Lucas asked, his voice sharp. Julian looked up, his eyes dark. "There's something I need to tell you. About your mother's death." The SUV pulled into the pharmacy parking lot, but Lucas barely noticed. 20 years ago, Julian said, his voice low and steady. It wasn't an accident. The pharmacy parking lot was half empty, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like trapped insects. Lucas sat frozen in the back seat, Maya's small body pressed against his side, her breathing shallow and rattling. The words Julian had just spoken hung in the air like smoke. Thick, toxic, impossible to clear. It wasn't an accident. Lucas turned the sentence over in his mind, trying to find the angle where it made sense. His mother had been driving home from her night shift. A drunk driver had run a red light. It was open and shut. The police had told him so. The insurance had paid out. He'd buried her in a small cemetery on the outskirts of the city, the same place his father was buried, and he'd spent the next decade trying to forget the sound of the phone ringing at 3 in the morning. "What are you talking about?" Lucas's voice was hoarse. "She was hit by a drunk driver. I saw the report. I identified her body." Julian turned in his seat, his face half illuminated by the pharmacy's neon glow. His eyes were shadowed, unreadable. "I know what the report said. I read it myself, years ago, when I was trying to find her. But I also found something else. Something the police missed." Lucas felt Maya stir against him. She was getting heavier, more lethargic. He needed to get her medication. He needed to get her inside. But his body wouldn't move. "What did you find?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Julian was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on some point in the middle distance. "My father," he said finally. "He had ties to people who did things. Dirty things. When my mother started searching for Margaret, he found out. He didn't want her to find her sister. He didn't want that connection to exist." Lucas shook his head slowly, refusing to understand. "Your father was a billionaire. Why would he care about a cleaner? Why would he care about my mother?" "Because my mother had something on him," Julian said, his voice hard. "Something that could have destroyed him. She was planning to leave him, to take me and disappear. But she couldn't do it without Margaret. She needed a support system, someone who would help her hide. And my father couldn't let that happen." Lucas felt sick. The SUV's leather seats, which had felt so luxurious just moments ago, now felt like a cage. "You're telling me your father had my mother killed?" Julian didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence was answer enough. "Daddy," Maya's small voice cut through the fog. "My chest feels tight." Lucas snapped back to the present. He opened the door and scrambled out, pulling Maya with him. "We need to get her medication," he said, his voice sharp and desperate. "We can talk about this later." Julian got out as well, gesturing to the driver to stay put. He followed Lucas into the pharmacy, his long strides eating up the distance. Lucas was already at the counter, fumbling in his pocket for the prescription slip. "Where's the doctor's office?" Lucas asked the pharmacist, a tired-looking woman with reading glasses perched on her nose. "How long do I have? Can I get an emergency refill?" The pharmacist took the slip, scanned it, and frowned. "This prescription has already been filled this month." Lucas blinked. "What? No. No, it hasn't." The pharmacist tapped at her keyboard, her brow furrowing. "According to the system, it was picked up on the 15th. Someone named Chloe Williams signed for it." Lucas felt the ground shift beneath him. Chloe, his ex-wife. She'd picked up the prescription, but she'd told him she couldn't afford it. She'd told him Maya was going to run out. "She picked it up," Lucas repeated, his voice hollow. "But she told me she didn't have the money." Julian stepped forward, his presence suddenly larger than life. "Excuse me," he said to the pharmacist, his voice smooth and authoritative. "I'm the child's uncle. We need a refill. I'll pay for it, whatever it costs." The pharmacist shook her head. "I can't dispense a refill without a doctor's authorization. This medication is controlled. I need a new prescription, or I need the doctor to call it in. Julian's jaw tightened. Then call the doctor. It's nearly midnight, the pharmacist said, clearly unimpressed by his authority. The doctor's office is closed. I can't call her. I can't reach her. Lucas felt a cold wave of panic wash over him. He looked down at Maya, who was leaning against his leg, her face pale and sweaty. Please, he said, his voice breaking. She's 6 years old. She can't breathe. I'll do anything. I'll sign anything. Just give her something. The pharmacist hesitated. She could see the fear in Lucas's eyes, the trembling in his hands. But the rules were the rules. I'm sorry, she said. I really can't. If I do, I could lose my license. Julian stepped closer to the counter, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous whisper. You will call the on-call physician. You will explain the situation. And you will make sure this child gets her medication. I'll pay double, triple, whatever you need to make it happen. The pharmacist's eyes widened. She looked at Julian's suit, his watch, the aura of money that surrounded him like a fog. I can try, she said. But I can't promise anything. Try, Julian said, his voice brooking no argument. While the pharmacist made her calls, Lucas crouched down beside Maya, holding her small hands in his. Her face was flushed with fever, her breath coming in short, painful gasps. It's okay, baby, he murmured. It's gonna be okay. We're gonna get you your medicine. Maya coughed, a wet, rattling sound that made Lucas's heart stop. Daddy, she wheezed. I'm scared. Lucas pulled her into a hug, feeling the rapid flutter of her heartbeat against his chest. He didn't know how he was going to afford this. He didn't know how he was going to get through the next hour. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He wasn't going to let his daughter die. Julian watched the scene, his face unreadable. But behind his cold exterior, something was churning. He remembered his mother, the way she'd struggled to breathe in her final days, the way the hospital had refused to admit her without insurance. He remembered the helplessness, the rage, the desperate need to do something. Anything. To make it stop. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Alan, he said, his voice clipped. I need you to get in touch with Dr. Morris. Now. It's a medical emergency. A pause. No, I don't care what time it is. Get him on the phone. I need him to authorize an emergency prescription for a child. And Alan, I want Chloe Williams's number. The ex-wife. I need to know why she picked up a prescription and didn't give it to her child. Lucas looked up, his eyes raw with exhaustion. You don't have to do this, he said. I can handle it. Julian met his gaze. I know you can handle it, he said. But you don't have to. Not tonight. And I need to tell you something else about your mother. But first, let's get Maya taken care of. The pharmacist called them over. The on-call doctor can't prescribe without seeing the patient, she said. But she said she can meet you at the emergency room. She'll be there in 30 minutes. I've called ahead to the hospital. They're expecting you. Lucas felt a wave of relief so intense it almost knocked him over. He scooped Maya into his arms, feeling the slight weight of her, the feverish heat radiating from her skin. Thank you. He breathed as Julian nodded curtly. Let's go. The drive to the hospital was a blur of streetlights and silent streets. Maya dozed in Lucas's lap, her breathing still labored, but less panicked now that there was a plan. Lucas stared out the window, his mind churning with questions. Tell me about the accident, he said, not looking at Julian. Tell me what you found. Julian was quiet for a moment. Then he began to speak, his voice low and measured. My father had a business partner named Vincent Marchetti. They were involved in some illegal deals, real estate fraud, money laundering. My mother found out about it. She wanted to go to the authorities. But she was scared, so she tried to find Margaret. She thought if she had her sister, she could disappear. Lucas listened, his heart pounding. What happened? She was planning to leave the city, Julian continued. She had a ticket. She was going to take me and run. But my father found out. He intercepted her at the airport. They had a fight. It was bad. Julian's voice faltered for the first time. He told her that if she tried to leave, he'd destroy Margaret. He'd ruin her life. He'd make sure she never found peace. Lucas felt a cold fury building in his chest. So my mother died because your father threatened her, Julian shook his head. No, my mother died because she told my father where Margaret was. She gave him the address. She thought if she cooperated, he'd leave Margaret alone. She was wrong. Lucas's hands clenched into fists. He killed her, not directly, but he sent people to scare her, to make her disappear. And your mother, Margaret, she ran. She got in her car and she drove, trying to get away from them. And that's when the drunk driver hit her. Julian's voice was heavy, weighed down by years of guilt. It was supposed to be a warning, just a scare. But someone made a mistake. Someone went too far. Lucas wanted to scream. He wanted to break something. Instead, he just sat there, Maya's small body warming his chest, and let the rage wash over him. Who else knows? He asked finally. Just me, Julian said. I found out after my father died. He had a file. Documents, recordings, photographs. He kept everything. I think he wanted to have leverage over his partners, just in case. But he never had the chance to use it. And you're telling me this now because... Julian turned to face him, his eyes dark and serious. Because I know what it's like to carry a secret you can't share. And I know what it's like to spend your life running from something you can't escape. Lucas stared at him. So what do you want from me? I want to help you, Julian said simply. I want to make things right. For you. For Maya. For your mother. I want to make sure that what happened to her never happens to anyone else. The SUV pulled into the hospital parking lot. Lucas looked at the brightly lit building, the emergency room entrance glowing with sterile white light, and felt a strange sense of calm settle over him. Okay, he said. Let's get Maya seen. Then we'll talk. They got out of the SUV. Julian led the way, his presence parting the crowd like a ship cutting through water. Lucas followed, Maya cradled in his arms, and for the first time in months, he allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things would be okay. The hospital was chaos. But Julian's money opened doors. Within minutes, they were in a private examination room, and a doctor was examining Maya. Lucas sat in a plastic chair, his hands clasped together, watching as the doctor listened to Maya's chest. She's in respiratory distress, the doctor said. We're going to give her a nebulizer treatment. That should open up her airways. Then we'll talk about long-term care. Lucas nodded, not trusting his voice. A nurse came in with the nebulizer, and Maya settled into the treatment, her breathing slowly easing. Lucas watched the medication mist rise around her face and felt a tiny, fragile knot of hope loosen in his chest. Julian stood in the corner, his phone in his hand, typing rapidly. He was making more calls, arranging payments, signing guarantees. He looked like a man on a mission, and Lucas wasn't sure if that was a good thing. I got a hold of Chloe, Julian said finally, looking up from his phone. She's on her way. Lucas's stomach clenched. Why did you call her? Because I wanted to know why she picked up the prescription, Julian said flatly. And I wanted to hear her explanation for why your daughter is sitting in an emergency room without her medication. Lucas opened his mouth to respond, to defend Chloe, to explain their complicated history, but the words died in his throat. Because the door opened, and Chloe walked in. She was thinner than he remembered, her face pinched with worry. She wore a cheap jacket over a stained blouse, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. When she saw Maya, her face crumpled. Baby, she breathed, rushing to the bed. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Lucas stood, his body trembling with exhaustion and anger. Chloe, he said, his voice low. What happened to the medication? Chloe's eyes flicked to him, then to Julian, who was watching with cold, analytical interest. She swallowed hard. I needed the money. Maya's medication was expensive, and I had a bill due. I thought I could sell it and buy her a generic brand. But the generic isn't as strong, and then she started coughing, and I couldn't afford another prescription. Lucas felt like he'd been punched in the gut. You sold her medication. I was desperate. Chloe cried. I didn't know what else to do. I had to pay the electricity bill, Lucas. I had to keep the heat on. So you traded our daughter's medication for a month of electricity? Lucas's voice was shaking now, the fury barely contained. Are you serious? Chloe's face crumpled. I didn't think it would hurt her. I thought I could make it work. Julian stepped forward, his voice cold and sharp as a blade. You thought wrong, he said. And now your daughter is in the emergency room because you chose money over her health. Chloe flinched. She looked at Julian, recognition dawning in her eyes. You're Julian Harrington, she whispered. You're the CEO of Harrington Industries. Why are you here? Julian's gaze was unrelenting. Because Maya is my family, he said. And I take care of my family. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Lucas looked at Julian, then at Chloe, then at Maya, who was breathing easier now, her eyes fluttering open with the first signs of relief. I want custody. Lucas said quietly. Chloe's head snapped up. What? I want full custody of Maya, Lucas repeated, his voice steady. You can't be trusted with her. You sold her medication. I don't care why. I can't trust you. Chloe's mouth opened, but no words came out. She looked from Lucas to Julian, and for the first time, she seemed to realize what she'd lost. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry, Lucas. I didn't mean to. Sorry won't fix it, Lucas said. Sorry won't make her breath easier. Sorry won't undo what you did. Julian stepped beside Lucas, his presence a quiet, steady force. I'll have my lawyers draw up the papers, he said. And we'll make sure Maya has everything she needs. Healthcare, education, security. He paused. And we'll make sure you have a chance to earn her trust back. But that's going to take time. Chloe nodded slowly, her face pale and defeated. Lucas turned away. He couldn't look at her. He went to Maya's bedside and took her small hand in his. Hey, sweetheart, he said softly. How are you feeling? Maya smiled a weak, tired smile. Better, Daddy. My chest doesn't feel tight anymore. Lucas kissed her forehead, hot and damp with sweat. That's good, baby. That's really good. From behind him, Julian's voice cut through the soft hum of the machines. Lucas, he said, when you're ready, we need to talk about the next steps. About your mother. About what comes next. Lucas nodded, not turning around. He knew the conversation was coming. He knew there were answers waiting for him. Truths that would change everything he thought he knew. But for now, all that mattered was Maya. He held her hand and watched her sleep. And in the quiet of the hospital room, he felt something he'd thought he'd lost forever. Hope. The hospital room was quiet except for the soft beeping of the monitor and the distant hum of the city filtering through the window. Maya was asleep, her small face peaceful for the first time in days. The nebulizer had done its job, and the doctor had assured Lucas that she would be fine with proper medication and rest. Lucas sat in the plastic chair beside her bed, his hands clasped between his knees. He hadn't slept in nearly 48 hours. His eyes were gritty, his body ached, and his mind was a churning storm of questions he couldn't answer. Chloe had left an hour ago, her face streaked with tears and mascara. She tried to hug Maya before she went, but Lucas had stepped between them. Not out of cruelty, but out of a fierce, primal need to protect his daughter from the woman who had traded her medication for a utility bill. Julian had stayed. He stood by the window now, his silhouette sharp against the pale morning light, his phone pressed to his ear. He'd been on calls for the past 2 hours, lawyers, doctors, accountants. He was building something. A fortress. A safety net. Lucas didn't know how to feel about it. Your lawyers are going to ruin her, Lucas said, his voice flat. Julian turned, his brow furrowing. I'm not trying to ruin anyone. I'm trying to protect Maya. Lucas shook his head. You don't get it. Chloe is a mess, but she's still Maya's mother. If you come at her with full legal force, she'll fight back. And Maya will be caught in the middle. Julian studied him for a long moment. What do you want me to do? Give her a second chance? She sold your daughter's medication, Lucas. She put her life at risk. I know. Lucas's voice cracked. I know what she did. But I also know what it's like to be desperate. I know what it's like to feel like you have no options. I've been there. I am there. Julian's expression softened, just a fraction. You're a better man than I am, he said quietly. If someone had done that to my child, I'd destroy them. I wouldn't think twice. Maybe that's the difference between us, Lucas said. You've always had the power to destroy. I've only ever had the power to survive. The words hung in the air, heavy and unspoken. Julian looked away, his jaw tight. For a moment, he seemed almost vulnerable, almost human. Let me handle the legal side, Julian said finally. I'll make sure Chloe has access to Maya. Supervised visits, to start. And I'll set up a fund for Maya's healthcare, independent of Chloe's control. That way, no matter what happens, she'll never have to worry about medication again. Lucas nodded slowly. It was more than he'd ever hoped for, more than he'd ever been able to provide. But something still gnawed at him, a persistent doubt that refused to be silenced. Why are you doing this? Lucas asked. Really, I know we're family, but you didn't even know me 24 hours ago. You had me thrown out of your gala. And now you're paying for my daughter's health care and calling lawyers. It doesn't add up. Julian was silent for a long moment. Then he crossed the room and sat in the chair opposite Lucas, his hands resting on his knees. His eyes were dark, troubled. Because I've spent 20 years running from my father's legacy, Julian said. He was a monster, Lucas. He destroyed everyone who got in his way. He destroyed my mother. He destroyed Margaret. And I sat by and let it happen because I was too scared to stop him. Lucas shook his head. You were a kid. You couldn't have stopped him. I could have tried, Julian said, his voice rough. I could have fought harder. I could have found Margaret myself. But I didn't. I was too busy trying to be his son, trying to earn his approval. And now I'm the CEO of his company, living in his penthouse, wearing his suits. I'm his legacy. Then change it, Lucas said. You have the power now. You can do things differently. Julian met his eyes. That's what I'm trying to do. But I need your help. I need to understand Margaret. I need to know who she was, what she believed in. Because if I'm going to tear down my father's legacy, I need to know what I'm building in its place. Lucas leaned back in his chair, exhaustion pulling at his bones. My mother was a good woman, he said slowly. She worked hard. She never complained. She always put me first, no matter what. She used to tell me that the world was a cruel place, but that didn't mean I had to be cruel too. She said kindness was the only thing that could break the cycle. Julian listened intently, his eyes fixed on Lucas's face. What else? Lucas smiled faintly, a memory rising to the surface. She loved to dance. Not the kind of dancing you see in ballrooms. She'd put on old records, Motown, soul music, and she'd just move. She'd grab my hands and spin me around the living room until we were both dizzy and laughing. She said dancing was the only way she knew how to forget the world. Julian's expression shifted, something soft and vulnerable flickering in his eyes. My mother used to do the same thing, he said. She'd put on the same records, the same Motown songs. She'd grab me by the hands and spin me until I couldn't stand up. Lucas stared at him. They were sisters, he whispered. They had the same memories. Same blood, Julian agreed. Same heart. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The connection between them was fragile, tentative, but it was there. A bridge built over decades of silence and lost it. I found something else, Julian said finally. In my father's files. A photograph. It was taken about a month before Margaret's accident. The two of them, Margaret and Elena, standing in front of a diner. They were smiling. They looked happy. Lucas's heart clenched. I've never seen a photograph of them together. My mother never kept any pictures of her sister. She said it hurt too much. Julian reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He scrolled through his photos, then handed the phone to Lucas. The screen glowed with a faded, grainy image. Two women, arms around each other, laughing at something off camera. They looked alike, same dark hair, same warm eyes. They could have been sisters. That's her, Lucas breathed. That's my mom. Julian nodded. I think they were planning something. I think they were trying to find a way out, together. But my father got to them first. Lucas handed the phone back, his hands trembling. What are you going to do with all of this, with the files, the evidence? Julian's expression hardened. I'm going to make sure it never happens again. To anyone. I'm going to use what my father left behind to expose the people who helped him, the people who covered up his crimes. I'm going to tear down everything he built. Lucas felt a strange mix of hope and fear. That's a dangerous game. You could lose everything. Maybe. Julian's voice was steady. But I've already lost everything that mattered. My mother. My innocence. My chance to be a different kind of man. I'm not going to lose my chance to make it right. Lucas opened his mouth to respond, but Maya stirred, her small hand reaching out. Daddy, she murmured, her eyes fluttering open. Lucas leaned forward, taking her hand. I'm right here, sweetheart. I'm not going anywhere. Maya smiled, her face still pale, but her eyes clear. Is the bad man gone? Lucas glanced at Julian, who raised an eyebrow. She means Chloe, Lucas said quickly. And no, baby, she's not gone. But she's not going to hurt you anymore. I promise. Maya nodded slowly, processing. What about the other man, the one with the money and the big car? Julian leaned forward, his voice gentle. That's me. I'm your uncle. And I'm going to take care of you. Okay, Maya studied him with the suspicious wisdom of a 6-year-old who'd learned not to trust adults. Do you have a dog? Julian blinked. No, I don't have a dog. Then how do you know how to take care of people? Maya asked. Daddy says dogs teach you how to be kind. A flicker of amusement crossed Julian's face. I don't have a dog, he repeated. But I have something better. I have a plan. Maya seemed to consider this. Plans are good, she said. Daddy makes plans all the time. They don't always work, but he tries. Lucas felt his throat tighten. He looked at Julian, who was watching Maya with an expression that could only be described as wonder. "Your daughter is something special," Julian said quietly. "Yeah," Lucas agreed. "She's everything." A nurse came in to check Maya's vitals, and Julian stepped out to take another call. Lucas sat with Maya, stroking her hair, his mind still spinning with everything that had happened. "Are we rich now, Daddy?" Maya asked, her voice drowsy. Lucas laughed, a tired, broken sound. "No, baby. We're not rich. But we're okay. We're going to be okay." Maya nodded, her eyes already closing. "I'm glad," she murmured. "I don't like being poor. It's too scary." Lucas felt a tear slip down his cheek. He wiped it away quickly, not wanting Maya to see. "I know, baby. I know. But we're never going to be poor again. I promise." When Julian returned, his face was grimmed. "What happened?" Lucas asked. Immediately on alert, Julian sat down heavily in the chair opposite him. "I've been looking into your mother's accident more closely. There's a witness I never knew about. A woman who saw the car that hit Margaret. She said it wasn't a drunk driver. It was a professional. Someone who knew what they were doing." Lucas felt the blood drain from his face. "Are you saying?" "I'm saying your mother was murdered," Julian said. "And I think I know who ordered it." The room seemed to tilt. Lucas gripped the armrests of his chair, trying to steady himself. "Who?" Julian met his eyes, his expression unreadable. "Vincent Marchetti, my father's business partner. He's been dead for 10 years, but his son is still alive. And he's been running the family business ever since." Lucas shook his head. "I don't understand. Why would he order the hit? What did my mother have to do with him?" "She knew too much," Julian said. "She knew about the illegal deals. She knew about the money laundering. And she was planning to go to the police. My father couldn't let that happen. So he asked Marchetti to send a warning. But Marchetti went further. He sent a killer." Lucas's hands balled into fists. "So Marchetti's son is still out there, still running the same criminal empire?" Julian nodded. "And he's not going to like it when he finds out we're digging into his past." Lucas stared at him, a cold realization settling in his gut. "You're not just trying to expose your father's legacy. You're trying to take down Marchetti's son." Julian met his eyes, unflinching. "I'm trying to bring justice to everyone my father hurt," he said. "And that includes Marchetti." Lucas felt the weight of the world pressing down on him. He was a janitor, a single father, a man who'd spent his whole life trying to stay out of trouble. And now he was being pulled into a war that could destroy everything he had left. "Tell me what you need," Lucas said finally, his voice steady. "I'll help, but only if Maya stays safe. That's the only condition." Julian nodded. "She will. I promise. I'll hire round-the-clock security. She won't leave your side. And if anything happens, I'll make sure she's protected." Lucas stood up, his legs shaky but his resolve firm. "Then let's do it. Let's bring them down." Julian extended his hand. Lucas took it. It was a firm, steady handshake, a pact sealed with blood and shared history. "One more thing," Julian said. "Marchetti's son. His name is Nico, and he's been trying to buy up my father's holdings for years. He wants to control the company. And now he's going to realize he's not the only one with a claim." Lucas frowned. "What do you mean?" Julian smiled, a cold, predatory smile. "I mean, I'm going to use my father's own shares to take back control of the company. And I'm going to use every piece of evidence I have to destroy Nico Marchetti once and for all." Lucas nodded slowly, the plan taking shape in his mind. It was risky, dangerous, but it was also the only chance they had. Maya stirred again, murmuring in her sleep. Lucas looked at her, his heart swelling with love and determination. "I'm going to give her the life she deserves," Lucas said quietly. "No matter what it takes." Julian nodded. "We're going to do it together. Starting now." The first rays of sunlight streamed through the hospital window, casting the room in a warm, golden glow. Maya sighed in her sleep, her breathing steady and peaceful. Lucas looked at Julian, and for the first time, he allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could win. The Harrington Tower lobby gleamed like a cathedral of capitalism. Marble floors polished to a mirror shine, a massive chandelier dripping crystal, and security guards who looked like they could bench press a small car. Lucas stood in the center of it all, feeling like a fraud in his second-hand suit. 3 days had passed since the hospital. 3 days of lawyers, paperwork, and Julian's relentless efficiency. Maya was home, her new medication regimen in place, a nurse on standby. Chloe had signed the interim custody agreement without a fight. Julian's lawyers had made sure of that. But Lucas hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw his mother's face. He heard the screech of tires, the crunch of metal. He saw the photograph Julian had shown him. His mother and Elena, arms around each other, laughing at something the world had stolen from them. "You look like you're about to pass out." Lucas turned. Julian stood behind him, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Lucas's entire wardrobe. His expression was calm, controlled, but there was a new edge to it, a wariness that hadn't been there before. "I'm fine," Lucas said. "Just tired." Julian studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Nico Marchetti is in the conference room. He doesn't know you're coming. I want to keep it that way until we're ready." Lucas followed him toward the elevators, his heart pounding. Nico Marchetti, the son of the man who'd ordered his mother's death. The heir to an empire built on blood and corruption. "What's the plan?" Lucas asked as the elevator door slid shut. Julian pressed the button for the 47th floor. "I'm going to offer him a deal. A merger. He's been trying to acquire my father's holdings for years. I'm going to let him think he's winning. And me," Julian turned to face him. "You're going to be the wild card. I'm going to introduce you as my cousin and the new head of the Harrington Foundation's charitable division. It's a real position. I've already had the paperwork drawn up." Lucas blinked. "I don't know anything about running a foundation." "You don't need to," Julian said. "You just need to look like you belong. And when Nico asks questions, you're going to tell him the truth, that you're Margaret's son, that you want to carry on her legacy, that you're interested in his family's charitable work." Lucas's stomach churned. That's a bold move. He's going to know something's up. "Let him wonder," Julian said. "Confusion is a weapon. The more he tries to figure out what we're doing, the less attention he pays to what we're actually planning." The elevator doors opened onto a floor that looked more like a penthouse than an office. Rich wood paneling, abstract art on the walls, a massive aquarium filled with exotic fish. The conference room at the end of the hall had floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the entire city. Nico Marchetti was already there. He was younger than Lucas expected, early 40s, with slicked-back hair, a tailored suit, and the kind of practiced smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He stood when they entered, extending a hand to Julian. "Julian, good to see you again." "Nico." Julian shook his hand, his grip firm. "Thanks for coming on such short notice." Nico's smile widened. "When the CEO of Harrington Industries calls, I make time." His gaze shifted to Lucas, and the smile flickered. "Who's your friend?" Julian gestured for Lucas to sit. "This is my cousin, Lucas Williams. He's recently joined the Harrington Foundation as the head of community outreach." Nico's eyes narrowed. "Williams? That's not a name I've heard in connection with the Harringtons." "We're reconnecting after a long separation," Julian said smoothly. "Family matters." Nico studied Lucas with the cold calculation of a predator sizing up prey. "Lucas Williams," he repeated. "There's something familiar about you. Have we met?" "Don't think so," Lucas said, keeping his voice steady. "I've spent most of my life outside of this world. I'm not sure I belong in it." Nico laughed, a hollow, practiced sound. "Julian's got a way of making people feel like they belong. It's one of his many talents." The meeting proceeded smoothly. Julian laid out his proposal for a joint venture, a partnership between Harrington Industries and the Marchetti Group, focusing on real estate development. Nico listened, asked the right questions, and nodded at the right moments. He was good. Lucas had to give him that, but Lucas was watching for something else. A flicker of recognition, a slip of the mask. When Julian mentioned his mother's name, Margaret Williams, Nico's hand stilled on his coffee cup. "Margaret Williams," Nico repeated, his voice careful. "That's a name I haven't heard in a long time." Julian leaned forward, his expression guileless. "You knew her," Nico's smile returned, but it was tighter now, more controlled. "My father did business with a lot of people. The name rings a bell." "She was a cleaner, wasn't she? Worked for the Harrington family." "That's right," Julian said. "She was my mother's sister. She died in a car accident 20 years ago." Nico nodded slowly. "Tragic. These things happen." Lucas felt his hands clench under the table. These things happen. The casual dismissal of his mother's life, her death, it was like a knife twisting in his gut. "There's something else," Julian said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone. "I've been going through my father's old files. He had some, let's call them business records. I think you might find them interesting." Nico's eyes sharpened. "What kind of records?" Julian pulled a folder from his briefcase and slid it across the table. "Transactions. Payments. Names. My father was always meticulous about documenting his deals. I thought you might want to see what he kept. Nico opened the folder, his face carefully neutral. Lucas watched his eyes scan the pages, saw the micro-expressions, surprise, wariness, calculation. He was good at hiding his reactions, but he wasn't perfect. This is interesting, Nico said finally. Where did you find this? In my father's safe, Julian said. He never threw anything away. I guess he thought he might need it someday. Nico closed the folder, his smile back in place. This is very helpful, Julian. I appreciate you sharing it. Julian nodded. I thought you should know what he had. It might be useful for future partnerships. The meeting ended with handshakes and promises of future discussions. Nico left, his entourage trailing behind him, and Lucas finally let out the breath he'd been holding. That was close, Lucas said. He knew something. Julian nodded, his expression grim. He knows more than he's letting on. But we've planted the seed. Now we wait and see what grows. That night, Lucas couldn't sleep. He lay on the pull-out couch in Julian's penthouse, staring at the ceiling, Maya's soft breathing coming from the bedroom down the hall. The city lights filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the room. He thought about his mother, about the photograph Julian had shown him, the two sisters laughing together. He thought about the accident that had killed her, the cover-up that had let the killers walk free. And he thought about Nico Marchetti, with his practiced smile and his cold, dead eyes that he needed to do something. He couldn't just sit here, waiting for Julian to make the next move. He needed to be proactive. The next morning, Lucas found Julian in the study, surrounded by papers and coffee cups. He looked like he hadn't slept either. I need to talk to you, Lucas said. About my mother. About what happened. Julian looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. I've been going through more of my father's records. There's a name I keep seeing. A man named Frank Daniels. He was one of my father's fixers. He handled the less legal aspects of the business. Lucas frowned. What does that have to do with my mother? Julian leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. Frank Daniels was the one who arranged the hit. He was the middleman between Marchetti and the driver. If we can find him, we can prove what happened. Lucas's heart raced. Is he still alive? Julian nodded slowly. He's in a nursing home outside the city. He has dementia. The doctors say he has good days and bad days. But on his good days, he remembers everything. Lucas felt a surge of determination. Then we need to talk to him. Today. Julian hesitated. It's risky. If Marchetti finds out we're talking to Daniels, he'll know what we're doing. He'll shut us down before we can make a move. Then we don't let him find out, Lucas said. We go quietly. We talk to him, we get what we need, and we get out. Julian studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, we'll leave in an hour. I know a back route. The nursing home was a sad, sterile place on the outskirts of the city. White walls, linoleum floors, the faint smell of antiseptic and despair. Frank Daniels was in a room at the end of the hall, sitting by the window in a wheelchair. He was a small man, shrunken with age, his eyes cloudy with confusion. When Lucas and Julian entered, he looked up, his expression blanked. Who are you? He asked, his voice thin and reedy. Mr. Daniels, Julian said gently. I'm Julian Harrington. I think you knew my father. Recognition flickered in the old man's eyes. Harrington, he repeated. Arthur Harrington. I worked for him. Yes, sir. You did. I'm here to ask you about something that happened a long time ago. About a woman named Margaret Williams. Frank Daniels's face went pale. He looked away, his hands trembling. I don't remember. I don't remember anything. Lucas stepped forward, his heart pounding. Please, sir. She was my mother. I need to know what happened to her. I need to know who killed her. The old man's eyes met Lucas's, and for a moment, the cloudiness cleared. You look like her, he whispered. You look just like her. Lucas felt his throat tighten. Please, tell me what you remember. Frank Daniels was silent for a long moment. Then he began to speak, his voice halting, fragmented. He told them about the night of the accident, about Marchetti's orders, about the driver who'd been hired to scare Margaret but had gone too far. It wasn't supposed to be an accident, Frank said, his voice cracking. It was supposed to be a warning, just a warning. But the driver, he had a personal grudge. He was drunk. He hit her too hard. Lucas felt the words hit him like a physical blow. Who was the driver? Frank Daniels shook his head, his eyes filling with tears. I don't remember. I can't remember. It was so long ago. Please, Lucas begged. Please try. But the old man's face was slipping back into confusion. He looked at Lucas like he'd never seen him before. Who are you? He asked. Why are you here? Julian touched Lucas's arm. We need to go. We're pushing him too hard. Lucas didn't want to leave. He felt like he was so close, like the truth was just out of reach. But Julian was right. They'd gotten what they could. As they walked out of the room, a nurse stopped them. Are you family? She asked. Julian shook his head. No, just old friends. The nurse nodded, not asking any more questions. She was used to strangers coming and going, to the constant parade of people who might or might not have been part of her patients' lives. Lucas and Julian walked back to the car in silence. The weight of what they'd learned hung between them, heavy and inescapable. She was just trying to protect us, Lucas said finally. My mother. She was just trying to protect me. Julian nodded, his face grim. And she paid for it with her life. Lucas looked out the window, the city blurring past. I'm going to make this right, he said. For her. For Maya. For everyone my mother tried to protect. Julian's hand tightened on the steering wheel. We will. Together. They drove back to the penthouse in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. When they arrived, Lucas found Maya sitting on the floor, playing with her stuffed rabbit. Daddy, she cried, running to him. Where did you go? Lucas scooped her up, hugging her tight. I was just talking to someone, sweetheart. About Grandma. Maya's face brightened. I want to hear about Grandma. Lucas kissed her forehead. One day, baby. One day, I'll tell you everything. But as he held his daughter, he knew that day would come sooner than he thought. And when it did, he'd be ready. The penthouse felt different now. Smaller. More dangerous. Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that every shadow held a pair of eyes tracking their movements. He'd spent his whole life invisible, a ghost in the background of other people's lives. Now he was front and center, and the spotlight burned. Julian had installed a security system that rivaled a military installation. Cameras on every corner, motion sensors on every window, a team of former Special Forces operatives rotating shifts in the lobby and the parking garage. Maya thought it was a game. She loved pressing the buttons on the control panel and watching the lights blink. Lucas didn't sleep. He sat by Maya's bed every night, watching her chest rise and fall, listening to the steady rhythm of her breathing. The medication was working. Her asthma was under control. But the fear that had taken root in his chest refused to let go. I need you to do something for me, Julian said one morning, finding Lucas in the kitchen. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, his usually immaculate hair disheveled. Nico Marchetti is hosting a dinner tomorrow night. I need you to be there. Lucas set down his coffee cup. Why? Because he's invited us both, Julian said. And if we don't show up, it'll look suspicious. We need to maintain the illusion that we're playing along with his game. Lucas shook his head. I can't leave Maya alone. She won't be alone. I'll have a full security detail here. She'll be safer than she's ever been. Julian paused. And I need you there, Lucas. I can't do this alone. Lucas studied his cousin's face, seeing the cracks in the armor for the first time. Julian Harrington wasn't invincible. He was just a man trying to atone for sins that weren't entirely his own. Fine, Lucas said. I'll go. But I'm not wearing a tuxedo. Julian almost smiled. Deal. The Marchetti estate was everything Lucas had expected and more. A sprawling mansion on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by walls and security gates. The driveway was lined with expensive cars, the house lit up like a palace. Inside, the guests were the kind of people Lucas had only ever seen in magazines. Politicians, celebrities, old money and new. Nico met them at the door, his smile as practiced as ever. Julian. Lucas. So glad you could make it. Lucas shook his hand, forcing himself to meet the man's eyes. Thanks for the invitation. Nico's gaze lingered on him a moment too long. You clean up well, Lucas. I almost didn't recognize you. He laughed, a sound that didn't quite reach his eyes. Come in, come in. There are people I want you to meet. The evening was a blur of handshakes and small talk. Lucas smiled, nodded, said the right things. But his mind was elsewhere, replaying the conversation with Frank Daniels, the old man's trembling voice describing the night his mother died. Julian worked the room like a politician, shaking hands, making connections. He was in his element, charming and calculating. Lucas watched him, seeing the man beneath the mask, the boy who'd lost his mother, the son who tried to earn his father's love. The man who was now trying to tear it all down. I need some air, Lucas said, slipping away from a conversation about real estate investments. He found a balcony overlooking the estate's gardens, the night air cool against his face. The stars were out, faint pinpricks of light in the vast darkness. He thought about his mother, about the life she'd wanted for him. He thought about Maya, about the life he wanted for her. They were the same, he realized. Simple, honest, unafraid. Beautiful night, isn't it? Lucas turned. Nico Marchetti stood in the doorway, a glass of wine in his hand. His smile was back, but there was something else in his eyes now. Something sharp and calculating. It's okay, Lucas said, turning back to the view. I'm not much for crowds. Nico joined him at the railing. I understand. I grew up in this world, and I still don't always feel like I belong. He paused. You know, when Julian told me you were his cousin, I was surprised. I didn't know the Harringtons had any other family. Neither did I, Lucas said. We're reconnecting after a long time. Nico nodded slowly. I hear you lost your mother. I'm sorry about that. Lucas felt his hands clench on the railing. It was a long time ago. 20 years, wasn't it? Nico's voice was casual, almost bored. A car accident. A drunk driver. Tragic. Lucas turned to face him. You knew her. Nico's smile flickered. I knew of her. My father did business with the Harringtons. I'm sure he mentioned her at some point. Did he mention how she died? Lucas's voice was steady, but his heart was pounding. Nico's eyes narrowed. What are you getting at, Lucas? Nothing. Lucas forced himself to smile. Just making conversation. They stood in silence for a long moment, the tension between them thick and unspoken. Then Nico laughed, a short, sharp sound. You're an interesting man, Lucas Williams. I look forward to getting to know you better. He disappeared back inside, leaving Lucas alone with his thoughts. The dinner was interminable. Course after course of food Lucas couldn't taste, conversation that circled around him like sharks. Julian was at the other end of the table, deep in conversation with a senator. Lucas was seated next to a woman who spent the entire meal talking about her daughter's wedding plans. When it was finally over, Lucas practically fled to the car. Julian followed a few minutes later, his face unreadable. That was a mistake, Julian said as the car pulled away from the estate. Lucas looked at him. What was calling him out like that? You tipped your hand. I didn't call him out, Lucas said. I just asked a question. Julian shook his head. You made it clear you know something. He's going to start digging now. He's going to figure out what we're doing. Then we need to move faster, Lucas said. We need to find more evidence. We need to find the driver. Julian was silent for a long moment. I've been looking into it. There's a name I keep coming across. A man named Victor Cruz. He was one of Marchetti's drivers. He disappeared a month after your mother's accident. Lucas's heart raced. Do you know where he is? Julian shook his head. I have a lead. A phone number. It's untraceable, but I have a guy who thinks he can ping the location. How long will that take? Hours. Maybe days. It's not an exact science. Lucas leaned back in his seat, his mind racing. They were so close. He could feel it, the truth just out of reach. The call came 3 days later. Julian's phone buzzed in the middle of breakfast. Lucas watched his face as he listened, saw the flicker of something. Hope, maybe, or fear. When Julian hung up, his expression was carefully neutral. They found him, Julian said. Victor Cruz. He's been living under an assumed name in a town about 2 hours from here. He works as a mechanic at a small garage. Lucas stood, his chair scraping against the floor. Let's go. Not you, Julian said. It's too dangerous. Lucas shook his head. He killed my mother. I'm going. Julian studied him for a moment, then nodded. Fine. But we do this my way. We go in quiet, we ask questions, and we get out. If he's armed, you stay behind me. Got it? Lucas nodded, his heart pounding. The drive was long and tense. Julian drove, his hands tight on the steering wheel. Lucas stared out the window, watching the city give way to suburbs, then to open country. What do you think he'll tell us? Lucas asked. I don't know, Julian said. But I know what I want him to tell us. I want him to tell us who ordered the hit. I want him to give us the proof we need. And if he doesn't, Julian's jaw tightened. Then we find another way. The garage was a small, rundown building on the edge of a dying town. A sign above the door read, Cruz Auto Repair, in faded letters. A man was working under a car, his legs visible below the chassis. Lucas and Julian approached cautiously. The man heard them coming and slid out from under the car, wiping his hands on a rag. He was in his late 50s, bald, with a weather-beaten face and wary eyes. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice gruff. "Victor Cruz," Julian asked. The man's face went pale. "Who's asking?" Julian stepped forward, his voice low and steady. "My name is Julian Harrington. This is my cousin, Lucas Williams. We need to talk to you about something that happened 20 years ago." Victor's eyes darted between them, looking for an escape. But the garage was open and exposed. There was nowhere to run. "I don't know what you're talking about," Victor said. "I don't know anything." "Please," Lucas said, his voice cracking. "She was my mother. She was a good woman. She didn't deserve to die." Victor's eyes met his, and for a moment, something flickered in them. Guilt, maybe. Or feared. "I can't help you," Victor said. "If I talk, they'll kill me." "Who?" Julian demanded. "Who will kill you?" Victor shook his head, backing away. "You need to leave. Now. Before someone sees you." "Victor, please," Lucas begged. "I'm not asking you to testify. I just need to know. I need to know why." Victor's face crumpled. He looked at Lucas, and in his eyes, Lucas saw the same grief, the same guilt, the same impossible weight. "I didn't want to do it," Victor said, his voice breaking. "They told me it was just a warning. Just scare her. But I was drunk. I was angry. I hit the gas too hard." Lucas felt the world tilt. "You killed her." Victor nodded, tears streaming down his face. "It was an accident. I swear. I was just supposed to scare her. I didn't mean to kill her." "Who told you to do it?" Julian demanded. "Who ordered it?" Victor's face contorted with fear. "Marchetti, Nico's father. He said she knew too much, that she had to be silenced." Lucas's hands balled into fists. He took a step forward, his vision red with rage. "You killed my mother. You took her away from me." "Lucas," Julian grabbed his arm, holding him back. "It's not worth it. You'll only make it worse." Lucas struggled against him, the rage overwhelming. But then he saw Victor's face, the fear, the guilt, the shame, and he stopped. The man had been living with this for 20 years, hiding from the shadows of his past. He was already condemned. "Tell me who else was involved," Lucas said, his voice cold. "Tell me everything." Victor nodded, wiping his eyes. "There was a man, a lawyer. He helped cover it up. He made sure the police report showed a drunk driver. He made sure everyone believed it." Julian's face went pale. "Who? What was his name?" Victor met his eyes. "His name was Harold. Harold Sterling. He was Arthur Harrington's personal attorney." The name hung in the air like smoke. Harold Sterling. Arthur Harrington's personal attorney. The man who had buried the truth, who had made sure a grieving son never knew the full story of his mother's death. Lucas felt the rage simmering beneath his skin, but he forced himself to stay calm. Victor Cruz was trembling, his face wet with tears. The man was broken, hollowed out by years of guilt and fear. There was nothing more to gain from him. "Where do we find Sterling?" Lucas asked, his voice flat. Victor shook his head. "I don't know. I haven't seen him in years. After the accident, he disappeared. I heard he retired somewhere warm. Florida, maybe. Or the Caribbean." Julian pulled out his phone, already typing. "I'll have my people start searching. If he's still alive, we'll find him." Victor looked between them, his eyes desperate. "You're not going to tell anyone I talked, are you? If Marchetti finds out, he'll kill me. He'll kill my family." Lucas studied the man who had taken his mother's life. He felt no pity, only a cold, hollow emptiness. But he also knew that Victor was just a tool, a broken instrument used by darker hands. "We won't say anything," Lucas said quietly. "But if you ever think about running, think again. I will find you." Victor nodded, his face pale. Julian grabbed Lucas's arm and pulled him toward the car. The drive back was silent. Lucas stared out the window, his mind churning. Harold Sterling. The name repeated like a curse. His mother had been killed, and a lawyer had helped cover it up. A lawyer who had worked for Julian's father. "Did you know?" Lucas asked finally, his voice low. Julian glanced at him. "Know what?" "About Sterling. About the cover-up." Julian's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "I knew my father had a lawyer. I knew he handled sensitive matters. But I didn't know about your mother's accident. Not until I found the files." Lucas turned to face him. "You said you spent years looking for my mother. You said you hired investigators. How did you not find out about Sterling?" Julian was silent for a long moment. "Because I was looking for Margaret, not for the truth about her death. I assumed it was an accident. Everyone did. The police report, The insurance claim, the witnesses, it all pointed to a drunk driver. He paused. And my father was good at hiding things. He was a master of misdirection. Lucas leaned back in his seat, exhaustion pulling at him. So we find Sterling. And we hope he's willing to talk. Julian nodded. And if he's not, we make him. The search for Harold Sterling took 3 days. Julian's investigators traced him to a small island in the Bahamas, where he lived in a gated community with a view of the ocean. He was old now, in his late 70s, living off the wealth he'd accumulated over a lifetime of serving powerful men. Julian chartered a private jet. Lucas stared out the window as they flew over the ocean, the blue water stretching endlessly in every direction. He thought about his mother, about the life she'd wanted for him. She'd never wanted this. She'd never wanted him to be consumed by revenge. But she'd also never wanted to die alone on a dark road. Her body broken and abandoned. The island was beautiful, a paradise of white sand and turquoise water. But Lucas saw none of it. He was focused on the house at the end of the road, a sprawling mansion with palm trees and a private dock. Harold Sterling was waiting for them on the porch, a glass of iced tea in his hand. He was older than Lucas expected, his face lined with age, his hair white and thinning. But his eyes were sharp, watchful. He'd known they were coming. "Mr. Harrington," Sterling said as they approached. "I was wondering when you'd find me." Julian stopped a few feet from the porch. "You knew we'd come," Sterling smiled, a thin, cold expression. "I've been waiting for this day for 20 years. I knew it would catch up to me eventually." His gaze shifted to Lucas. "You must be Margaret's son. You have her eyes." Lucas felt a chill run down his spine. "You knew my mother," Sterling nodded slowly. "I met her once. She came to my office, desperate, afraid. She wanted to know who was threatening her. She wanted me to help her." His voice softened. "I turned her away. I told her there was nothing I could do." "You lied," Lucas said, his voice sharp. "You knew exactly what was happening. You helped cover it up." Sterling's face was unreadable. "I did what I was paid to do. I protected my client." Julian stepped forward, his voice cold. "My father is dead. You don't have to protect him anymore." Sterling laughed, a dry, rattling sound. "Your father was a monster, Julian. But he was also a genius. He knew how to bury secrets so deep they'd never be found." He paused. "But you found them. I assume you've already talked to Victor Cruz." "We have," Lucas said. "He told us everything." Sterling nodded, as if he'd expected that. Victor was a mess. A broken man. He never should have been part of it. But Marchetti was insistent. He wanted someone who could handle the mess if things went wrong. "Things did go wrong," Lucas said. "My mother died." Sterling met his eyes, and for the first time, Lucas saw something like regret in them. "Yes, she did. And I've carried that weight every day since." Julian stepped closer. "We need you to testify, to tell the world what really happened." Sterling shook his head slowly. "I can't do that. If I testify, I'll be admitting to my own crimes. I'll go to prison." "You're already in prison," Lucas said. "You've been in prison for 20 years. You've just been paying for it with your conscience instead of your freedom." Sterling's face tightened. "You're a lot like your mother," he said quietly. She had the same fire in her eyes, the same refusal to back down. Lucas felt a lump form in his throat. "She deserved better than what you gave her." Sterling looked away, his gaze fixed on the ocean. "I know, and I've spent 20 years trying to forget that." Julian stepped closer, his voice dropping to a low, urgent tone. "We have Marchetti's son. He's trying to take over my company. He's trying to repeat his father's crimes. If you don't help us, he'll succeed." Sterling was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed, a deep, weary sound. "You're asking me to risk everything I have left." "I'm asking you to do what's right," Julian said. "For once in your life." Sterling looked at Lucas, and something in his expression shifted. "Your mother came to me asking for help," he said, "and I turned her away. I've regretted it ever since." He paused. "I'll testify, but on one condition." "Name it," Julian said. That Sterling's eyes met his. "You need to protect me. Marchetti's people will come after me the moment I speak. I need a safe place to stay, a new identity. I need to disappear." Julian nodded. "Done." Sterling nodded slowly, as if sealing a contract. "There's one more thing," he said. "Something that's been buried for even longer than your mother's death." Lucas felt a prickle of unease. "What?" Sterling looked at Julian. "Your father didn't just have Margaret killed. He had his own wife killed too." Julian went pale. What are you talking about, Elena? Sterling said quietly. Your mother. She didn't die of a heart attack. She was poisoned. Slowly, carefully, over a period of months. Your father wanted her out of the way. She knew too much about his business dealings. She was planning to leave him. He couldn't let that happen. Julian staggered back, his face a mask of shock. No, that's not true. I was there. I saw her. She had a heart condition. Sterling shook his head. That's what your father wanted everyone to believe. He had the doctor in on it. He paid him to falsify the records. Your mother was healthy, Julian. She was murdered by the man she married. Julian's hands were shaking. Lucas reached out, steadying him. Julian, are you okay? Julian didn't answer. He was staring at Sterling, his eyes wide with a mixture of horror and rage. You helped him, Julian said, his voice low and dangerous. You helped him kill my mother. Sterling's expression was unreadable. I helped him cover it up. There's a difference. There's no difference, Julian said, his voice rising. You're just as guilty as he is. I was young, Sterling said. I was afraid. Your father had power. He could have destroyed me. I did what I had to do to survive. Julian's fist was clenched, his whole body trembling with barely contained fury. Lucas stepped between them, his hands out. This isn't helping, he said quietly. We need him. If he testifies, he can bring down Marchetti's whole operation. Julian stared at Lucas, his eyes wild. You don't understand. He's talking about my mother. He's telling me she was murdered, and he helped cover it up. I understand, Lucas said, his voice steady. I understand more than you know. But if we destroy him, we'll lose our best chance to bring down Marchetti. Julian's shoulders sagged. The rage was still there, simmering beneath the surface, but it was contained. Fine, he said, his voice flat. He testifies. But after that, I never want to see him again. Sterling nodded, his face pale. That's more than I deserve. The flight back was silent. Julian stared out the window, his face cold and closed. Lucas sat beside him, his mind churning with everything they'd learned. He thought about his mother, the life she'd wanted for him. He thought about Elena, Julian's mother, who had been murdered by the man she'd married. And he thought about Maya, the little girl who deserved a better world than the one they were fighting to tear down. When they landed, Julian spoke for the first time. We have the evidence, he said quietly. We have the witnesses. We have everything we need to bring down Marchetti's empire. Lucas nodded. So what's the plan? Julian turned to face him, his eyes hard and determined. We go public. We give it all to the press, to the authorities, to anyone who will listen. We destroy Nico Marchetti the same way he destroyed our families. Lucas felt a surge of hope. And then we rebuild, Julian said. We make sure no one ever has to go through what we went through. We create something better. Lucas nodded slowly. It was a dream, a distant hope. But it was the only one they had. When they walked into the penthouse, Maya was waiting for them. She ran to Lucas, throwing her arms around his legs. Daddy, you're back. Lucas scooped her up, hugging her tight. I'm back, baby. I'm not going anywhere. Maya looked at Julian, her eyes curious. Are you okay, Uncle Julian? You look sad. Julian's expression softened. He knelt down, meeting Maya's eyes. I'm okay, he said. I'm just tired. Maya nodded, as if she understood. Daddy says tired is okay. Tired means you worked hard. Julian smiled, a real smile. Your daddy is a very smart man. Maya giggled. I know. He's the smartest daddy in the whole world. Lucas felt tears prick at his eyes. He looked at Julian, saw the same moisture in his cousin's eyes. They had been through hell together, and there was still more to come. But in this moment, with Maya laughing and the sun shining through the windows, it felt like everything might just be okay. That night, Lucas sat on the balcony, staring at the city lights. Julian joined him, 2 glasses of whiskey in his hand. To our mothers, Julian said, raising his glass. Lucas took the glass, clinking it against Julian's. To our mothers, he repeated. And to the truth. They drank in silence, the weight of the past settling around them like a familiar cloak. We're going to win this, Julian said finally. I know it. Lucas nodded. Yeah, we are. But even as he said it, he felt a cold knot of fear in his gut. There was still so much that could go wrong. And the man who had killed his mother's murderer was still out there, watching, waiting. The battle was just beginning. The morning of the press conference dawned gray and heavy, clouds pressing down on the city like a held breath. Lucas stood in front of the mirror in Julian's guest room, adjusting the collar of a new suit, one Julian had insisted on buying. It fit perfectly, tailored to his frame, but it still felt like someone else's clothes. His reflection stared back at him. Same face, same tired eyes, same calloused hands. But something had shifted behind his gaze. A hardness he hadn't possessed before. A resolve that came from knowing too much and having too much to lose. "You ready?" Julian stood in the doorway, already dressed in his signature charcoal suit. His face was composed, but Lucas could see the tension in his jaw, the way his fingers drummed against his thigh. "Ready as I'll ever be," Lucas said. Julian nodded. "The media is already assembled. Sterling is in a safe house under guard. Victor Cruz has agreed to testify via video link. We have everything we need." Lucas turned from the mirror. "And Maya, she's with the nanny and 2 security guards in the penthouse. She won't be watching. She's too young for this." Lucas nodded. He'd already said goodbye to her that morning, kissing her forehead as she slept. He'd told her he'd be back soon, that he was going to help make the world a better place. She'd smiled in her sleep, and that smile had given him all the strength he needed. The conference room at Harrington Tower was packed. Dozens of journalists, cameras, microphones. The buzz of anticipation was almost physical, a current that ran through the room like electricity. Lucas stood behind a podium next to Julian, his palms sweating, his heart pounding. Julian stepped up to the microphone first. The room fell silent. "Thank you all for coming," Julian began, his voice steady and commanding. "I've called this press conference today to address a series of events that have been hidden for far too long. Events that involve my family, my company, and a man who has been allowed to operate with impunity for decades." He paused, letting the words sink in. Lucas watched the journalists lean forward, their pens poised, their cameras rolling. 20 years ago, my father, Arthur Harrington, orchestrated a cover-up that resulted in the death of an innocent woman. That woman was Margaret Williams, my aunt, and the mother of my cousin, Lucas Williams, who stands beside me today. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Lucas felt the weight of their stares, the cameras turning toward him. He gripped the podium, steadying himself. "Margaret Williams was murdered," Julian continued. "Not in a random accident, as was reported at the time. She was killed because she knew too much about my father's illegal business dealings. And the man who ordered her death was Vincent Marchetti, the father of Nico Marchetti, who is currently the CEO of the Marchetti Group." The room erupted. Questions flew from every direction, a cacophony of voices demanding answers. Julian held up his hand, and the noise subsided. "We have evidence," Julian said. "We have witnesses. We have the full cooperation of Harold Sterling, my father's former attorney, who will testify to the cover-up. We have Victor Cruz, the man who was behind the wheel, who will testify to the events of that night. And we have documentation that links the Marchetti family to a pattern of criminal activity that spans decades." Lucas stepped forward, his voice shaking but determined. "My mother was a good woman. She worked hard, she loved her family, and she died because she refused to be silenced. I'm here today to make sure her voice is finally heard." The questions came again, sharper this time. Lucas answered as best he could, his words halting but honest. He told them about his mother, about the life she'd built, about the night she'd died. He told them about the years of silence, the years of grief, the years of wondering why. And then Julian took over again, laying out the evidence in cold, precise detail. The financial records, the phone logs, the testimony. He named names, pointed fingers, and left no doubt about who was responsible. The press conference lasted 2 hours. By the end, Lucas was exhausted, his voice hoarse, his body trembling with adrenaline. But as he walked off the stage, he felt a strange sense of peace. The truth was out. The secrets were no longer hidden. The aftermath was chaos. Nico Marchetti was arrested within hours, his empire crumbling as the evidence went public. The media was relentless, dissecting every detail, uncovering every hidden connection. The Harrington Foundation announced a new initiative to fund victims of corporate crime, and Lucas was named as its first director, but the victory felt hollow. Lucas lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, his mind replaying the events of the past few weeks. He'd gotten what he wanted, justice for his mother, a future for Maya. But the cost had been high. He'd lost his anonymity, his privacy, his simple life. "You're up," Julian stood in the doorway of the guest room, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He looked tired but satisfied. The tension that had been living in his shoulders finally eased. Couldn't sleep. Lucas said. Julian nodded, joining him on the couch. It's over. Marchetti is in custody. Sterling is testifying. Victor Cruz has been granted immunity in exchange for his testimony. Everything we wanted has happened. Lucas turned to face him. And now Julian was quiet for a moment. Now we rebuild. We make sure this never happens again. We use what we've built to help other people who've been through what we've been through. Lucas nodded slowly. I never thought I'd be here. In this penthouse. In this suit. Fighting this fight. Julian smiled, a tired, genuine smile. Neither did I. But here we are. And for what it's worth, I'm glad you're here. Lucas looked at his cousin, the man he'd known for only a few weeks, but who had become something like a brother. They'd been through hell together, and they'd come out the other side. Me too, Lucas said. I'm glad too. The next few weeks were a blur of interviews, meetings, and legal proceedings. Lucas appeared on every major news network, telling his mother's story, fighting for justice. Julian worked behind the scenes, using his power and influence to ensure the Marchetti empire was dismantled piece by piece. And Maya was thriving. Her asthma was under control, her laughter filled the penthouse, and she'd taken to calling Julian Uncle Julian, with a natural ease that made Lucas's heart ache. You're getting soft, Lucas teased one evening. Watching Julian play tea party with Maya in the living room, Julian looked up, a tiara perched on his head. I have no idea what you're talking about. Maya giggled, pouring imaginary tea into a plastic cup. Uncle Julian is the queen. I'm the princess. And you're the knight, Daddy. Lucas laughed, a real laugh, the kind he hadn't felt in years. I can be the knight. That sounds fair. As he sat down to join them, his phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. He opened it, and his blood ran cold. Asterisk. You think you've won, but you haven't. There are more secrets, more lies. And when they come out, everything you've built will come crashing down. Asterisk. Lucas stared at the screen, his heart pounding. He looked up at Julian, who was still wearing the tiara, still playing tea party, blissfully unaware. Julian, Lucas said, his voice tight. We have a problem. Julian looked up, instantly alert. What is it? Lucas handed him the phone. Julian read the message, his face going pale. This is Marchetti's work. He's got people on the outside. People who are still loyal to him. Lucas nodded slowly. He's not going to give up. He's going to keep fighting. Julian's jaw tightened. Then so will we. The battle wasn't over. It was just beginning. Later that night, Lucas sat on the balcony, the city lights glittering below him. He thought about his mother, about the life she'd wanted for him. He thought about Maya, about the future he was fighting for. And he thought about the enemy he'd made, the forces that were gathering against him. But he wasn't afraid. Not anymore. He'd been through too much, lost too much, to let fear control him. He pulled out his phone and typed a reply to the unknown number. Asterisk. You can try to tear us down. But I've spent my whole life fighting. And I'm not done yet. Asterisk. He hit send and put the phone away. Then he went inside, where Maya was waiting for him with a book in her hands and a smile on her face. Read me a story, Daddy. Lucas sat down beside her, pulling her into his lap. Of course, baby. What story do you want? Maya held up the book. The one about the princess who saves the kingdom. Lucas smiled, opening the book. That's a good story. I think I know it. He began to read, his voice steady and warm. Maya leaned against him, her eyes growing heavy. And for a moment, everything was perfect. But in the back of his mind, the threat still lingered. The message, the unnamed enemy, the secrets still buried. They were out there, waiting. And Lucas knew it was only a matter of time before they surfaced. But that was a fight for another day. Tonight, he was just a father, reading a bedtime story to his daughter. And that was enough. The penthouse had become a fortress. Security guards patrolled every entrance. Cameras monitored every corner, and the windows were reinforced with bulletproof glass. Lucas hated it. He hated the feeling of being trapped, of looking over his shoulder every time he stepped outside. But Julian had insisted, and after the anonymous threat, Lucas couldn't argue. Maya handled it better than he did. She'd taken to calling the guards her knights, and had assigned each of them a nickname based on their favorite color. She was 6, resilient in a way that made Lucas's heart ache. She didn't understand the danger, and he was grateful for that. The anonymous messages kept coming. Every few days, a new one would appear, each more threatening than the last. Lucas showed them to Julian, who had his team trace the numbers, but they always led to burner phones, dead ends. Marchetti has people on the outside, Julian said one evening, his face grim. People who are loyal to his family. They're trying to scare us, to make us back down. Lucas shook his head. I'm not backing down. Not after everything we've been through. Julian nodded. Neither am I. But we need to be careful. These people are dangerous. They've killed before, and they'll kill again. Lucas thought about his mother, about Victor Cruz's trembling confession. He thought about the years of silence, the secrets buried under layers of lies. He wasn't going to let that happen again. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday morning. Lucas was in the kitchen, making Maya's breakfast, when his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. He opened it, expecting another threat. Instead, he found a single line. A asterisk. I know who killed your mother. Asterisk. Lucas's heart stopped. He stared at the message, his mind racing. Could it be a trap? Another attempt to manipulate him, or could it be the truth? Finally surfacing after all these years, he called Julian immediately. I got a message. Someone says they know who killed my mother. Julian was at the penthouse within minutes. They sat in the study, the phone on the table between them, the message still glowing on the screen. Could be a trap, Julian said. Could be someone trying to lure you out. Lucas shook his head. Or it could be real. Someone who knows something. Someone who's been too scared to come forward until now. Julian was quiet for a long moment. If we answer, we're exposing ourselves. We're giving them a chance to hurt us. I know, Lucas said, but I can't ignore this. If there's a chance to finally know the truth, I have to take it. Julian hesitated, then nodded. Fine, but we do it my way. We meet them in a public place, with security. And if anything feels wrong, we leave immediately. Lucas agreed. He sent a reply, arranging to meet at a coffee shop in the middle of the city. The response came quickly. Asterisk, tomorrow. Noon. Come alone. Asterisk. Lucas didn't come alone. He arrived at the coffee shop with Julian and 2 undercover guards, all of them dressed casually, blending in with the crowd. Lucas sat at a corner table, a cup of coffee untouched in front of him, watching the door. The woman who walked in was older, maybe late 50s, with graying hair and tired eyes. She wore a simple coat and carried a worn handbag. She scanned the room, her gaze landing on Lucas, and she walked over to his table. Mr. Williams, she asked, her voice soft. Lucas nodded. Yes, you're the one who messaged me. The woman sat down, her hands trembling slightly. My name is Gloria. Gloria Martinez. I used to work for Arthur Harrington. I was his secretary for 12 years. Lucas leaned forward, his heart pounding. You knew my mother, Gloria nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I knew her. She was a good woman. Kind. Hardworking. She didn't deserve what happened to her. Lucas's hands clenched on the table. What do you know about her death? Gloria looked down at her hands, gathering her courage. I was there, Mr. Williams. I was in the office the night Arthur Harrington made the call. He was talking to Vincent Marchetti. He told him that Margaret was becoming a problem, that she knew too much. He asked Marchetti to deal with it. Lucas felt the blood drain from his face. You heard him make the call, Gloria nodded. I was filing papers in the outer office. The door was cracked open. I heard everything. I was so scared, Mr. Williams. I knew what they were planning. I knew they were going to hurt her. Lucas gripped the table, his knuckles white. Why didn't you come forward? Why didn't you tell the police? Gloria's face crumpled. I was afraid. I had a family, a husband, children. I knew what Arthur Harrington was capable of. If I spoke out, he'd destroy me. He'd destroy everyone I loved. Lucas felt the rage building in his chest, the old familiar fury. But he forced himself to stay calm. Why are you telling me this now? Gloria met his eyes, her voice steady for the first time. Because I'm dying, Mr. Williams. I have cancer. I've been given 6 months. I want to clear my conscience before I go. I want to tell the truth. Lucas stared at her, the weight of her words settling over him like a heavy cloak. He'd spent so long searching for the truth, and now it was sitting in front of him, fragile and human and heartbreaking. Will you testify? Lucas asked. Will you tell the world what you heard? Gloria nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. I will. I'll tell them everything. Julian appeared at Lucas's side, his face intense. We'll protect you, he said to Gloria. We'll make sure you're safe. Gloria looked at him, recognition dawning. You're his son. Arthur Harrington's son. Julian nodded. I'm trying to make things right. For everyone my father hurt. Gloria smiled, a sad, tired smile. You have his eyes. But you're nothing like him. That's a good thing. The testimony came a week later. Gloria Martinez stood in the witness stand, her voice steady and clear, and told the court everything she'd heard. The courtroom was packed, journalists and spectators filling every seat. Lucas sat in the front row, Julian beside him, their hands clenched in their laps that when Gloria finished, the room was silent. Then, slowly, the murmurs began. The case against Nico Marchetti and his father's empire was complete. The evidence was overwhelming. The truth was finally out. Nico Marchetti was convicted a month later. The sentence was life in prison. Lucas watched him being led away, his face pale and defeated, and felt a strange sense of closure. It wasn't joy. It wasn't satisfaction. It was something quieter, deeper, a sense that justice had finally been served. That evening, Lucas stood in the penthouse, looking out at the city lights. Maya was asleep in her room, her stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest. Julian was in the study, going over paperwork. The house was quiet, peaceful. Lucas pulled out his phone and typed a message to the unknown number that had started it all. It's over. My mother can finally rest. Thank you. He waited, but no reply came. He didn't expect one. Some mysteries were meant to remain unsolved. Julian joined him on the balcony, 2 glasses of whiskey in his hand. He handed one to Lucas, and they stood in silence, looking out at the city. You did it, Julian said quietly. You got justice for your mother. Lucas shook his head. We did it. I couldn't have done it without you. Julian smiled, a genuine smile. That's what family is for. Lucas raised his glass. To our mothers. Julian raised his. To our mothers. They drank, the whiskey burning warm in their throats. The city lights glittered below them, 1,000 stars in the darkness. I'm going to take Maya to the beach tomorrow, Lucas said. She's never seen the ocean. Julian nodded. That sounds nice. I'll come with you. Lucas turned to him, surprised. Really, Julian shrugged. It's been a long time since I've been to the beach. And I want to see Maya's face when she sees the water. Lucas smiled. She's going to love it. They stood in silence, the weight of the past finally lifting. The battle was over. The truth was out. And for the first time in 20 years, Lucas felt like he could breathe. That the next morning, they drove to the coast. Maya's face lit up when she saw the ocean, her small hands pressed against the car window. Daddy, it's so big. Lucas laughed, a real laugh, the kind that came from deep in his chest. It's the ocean, baby. It's the biggest thing in the world. Maya ran toward the water, her feet splashing in the waves, her laughter echoing across the beach. Lucas and Julian followed, their shoes in their hands, the sand warm beneath their feet. They stayed until sunset, watching the sky turn orange and pink. Maya built sandcastles, collected shells, and declared that she wanted to live at the beach forever. Maybe we can come back, Lucas said. Every summer. Maya hugged him, her small arms tight around his neck. I love you, Daddy. Lucas held her close, his eyes stinging with tears. I love you too, baby. More than anything. Julian watched them, his expression unreadable. Then he walked over, his feet bare, his suit jacket discarded on a rock. Can I get in on this? He asked. Lucas opened his arm, and Julian stepped into the embrace, the 3 of them standing together as the sun dipped below the horizon. It wasn't the ending Lucas had imagined. It was better. It was a new beginning.